The sun over Kala 3 was warm and gentle. It shone on fields of blue grain that swayed in the soft breeze. This was a peaceful place. The people who lived here were called Kalasans. They were farmers, artists, and thinkers. Long ago, their ancestors left a place called Earth. They wanted a simple life, a life without war or conflict. They succeeded. For many generations, Kala 3 knew only peace. Minsu wiped sweat from his forehead. He was a young man with kind eyes and strong hands from working the land. He checked the moisture level in the soil near his family's home. His sister, June, knelt nearby. She was studying a new type of vine that grew near their water pump. Her focus was complete. She loved all growing things. "The yield will be good this season," Minsu said, smiling. June looked up and returned his smile. "This vine is stronger than the last. It could help the entire North Field." Their world was small and good. They worried about the weather and the harvest. They did not worry about danger from the stars. They had no soldiers. They had no weapons. Their defense was their silence and their harmony with their world. That changed when the sky cracked. It began as a low hum. The hum grew until it vibrated in their bones. The gentle blue of the sky darkened, not with clouds, but with massive, silent shapes. The ships were the color of old bruises. They did not look built. They looked grown. They blocked out the sun. Minsu and Jun froze. A deep, cold feeling settled in their stomachs. It was not a sound they heard with their ears. It was a feeling that appeared in their minds. It was a wave of heavy despair, a crushing sense of hopelessness. It whispered a single, clear idea. "It is over. Be still. Do not struggle. This is the end." Across the colony, people stumbled to their knees. The psychic signal was a command for surrender. It was a call for what the newcomers defined as mercy. To them, mercy was a quiet, unresisted end. The Kalasans, raised in peace, had no defense against this. Their minds were flooded with alien despair. But their hearts, their human hearts, cried out against the injustice. A different signal left Kala 3. It was a radio transmission sent on old, almost forgotten human frequencies. It was a voice filled with terror, but also with a desperate nobility. "This is the Kalasan colony on Kala 3. We are under attack. The beings, they bring a wave of silence. They are harvesting us. Please, if anyone can hear this, know that we are dying." The voice broke. Then it grew stronger, fueled by a final, selfless thought. "But we beg you, do not come. If you are of our old blood, if you are from Earth, stay away. They are too strong. They will only harvest you as well. Our story ends here. Do not let yours end with it. This is our last wish. Do not come." On the ground, Minsu pulled June behind their storage hut. They watched in silent horror as tendrils of dark energy reached down from the ships. Where the light touched the fields, the blue grain turned gray and crumbled to dust. Where it touched an animal, the creature fell, its life vanished, leaving only a dry husk. The harvesters were efficient. They did not hate. They did not rage. They simply consumed. Their mercy was the psychic blanket that stopped their prey from causing a fuss. It was easier to harvest a being that had given up. The Kalasan radio plea repeated. It was a cry for help wrapped in a warning. It was a message saying, "We are lost. Save yourselves." They believed they were the last branch of humanity. They believed they were doing a final good deed by warning any distant cousins to stay away. The harvesters heard the radio signal too. They analyzed it. They understood the words. The concept of pleading for others to avoid danger was irrelevant. It was data. It did not change the function. The harvest continued. The calls for mercy, both the psychic command they sent and the desperate transmission they received, were ignored. One was a tool. The other was noise. Minsu held Jun's hand tightly. He saw his neighbors caught in the slow, creeping light. They did not scream. The psychic field made them accept it. They sat down and waited for the end, tears streaming down peaceful faces. A terrible anger cut through Minsu's own despair. This was wrong. This was not how things ended. Not like this. He looked at June. The fear in her eyes was being replaced by a deep sadness. The harvester signal was working on her. "It's okay, Min-Soo," she whispered. "Just be still. It doesn't hurt." "No," he said, the word sharp. He shook her. "Hyun, no. Look at me. This is not right. We do not just lie down." He was fighting against two enemies. The machines in the sky and the despair in his own mind. He was a farmer. He had never fought anything in his life. But the core of him, the human core passed down through centuries, rebelled. The gray field of death was halfway across their own farm now. It was coming for them. He pulled June to her feet and they ran toward the rocky hills, away from the spreading stillness. Their call for mercy had been ignored. Their warning to others was sent. As they ran, the only sound was the hum of the harvest and the quiet crumbling of their world. They did not know if their radio signal had found an ear. They believed in their hearts that they hoped it had not. Better for all of humanity to be forgotten, they thought, than to meet this gray and silent end. The harvesters continued their work, silent and untroubled. They had done this to countless species. This one was particularly docile. Their victory was complete. The planet would be empty in a few more hours. Another successful harvest. They did not consider the content of the plea. They did not consider that a plea to stay away could be a beacon. They simply ignored it. The listening post hung in the silent dark of space. It was a small station, a forgotten sentinel on the edge of known space. Its job was to listen to the cosmic noise, to sort through the static of the universe for anything that might be important. Taeyong was on duty. He was a patient man with tired eyes. His shift was long and usually very boring. He drank bitter coffee and watched lines of data scroll across his screen. Most of it was nonsense. The hum of stars, the whisper of distant gas clouds, the occasional broken signal from old human settlements. Then, a new signal cut through the usual noise. It was on an ancient frequency, one used by early human colonies. It was weak, but clear. A voice, speaking in a dialect of Korean so old it made his translation software struggle. He turned up the volume. The fear in the voice was immediate. Asterisk. This is the Callison colony on Kala 3. We are under attack. Asterisk. Taeyong sat up straight. He started the recording. The message described the ships, the psychic despair. It described the harvest. His blood ran cold. An attack on a human colony. His hand moved to send an alert. Then the message continued. The plea changed. If you are of our old blood, if you are from Earth, stay away. They are too strong. Do not come. He paused. They were begging for rescue and telling them not to come at the same time. It was a heartbreaking contradiction. He played it again. The desperation was clear. So was the selflessness. They believed they were saving others by dying alone. Taeyong sent the alert anyway. This was above his pay grade. Within minutes, his quiet station was flooded with virtual presence. Analysts, linguists, and officers appeared on his comm screen. He played the signal for them. The room fell silent. A senior analyst, a woman named Hannah, spoke first. The linguistic roots are pre-Exodus Korean. Pure. Unmixed. This isn't a colony that just speaks an old language. They are the old language. A geneticist, a man named Biam, reviewed the scant bioscans attached to the distress call. They're not just human-descended. They are baseline human, with a purity we haven't seen in centuries. No major adaptations. They are us, as we were. Captain Yuna's face appeared on the main screen. She was on the nearby carrier Dauntless. Her expression was like stone. They are telling us to abandon our own people, she stated. It wasn't a question. They believe they are protecting us. Captain, Hannah said softly. That is not their choice to make, Yuna replied. Her voice was quiet but firm. They are calling for mercy. They define it as us staying away. We define it differently. The debate began. Some officers agreed with the Callisons. The threat was unknown. The psychic weapon sounded terrible. What could they do against a force that could make you want to die? Running was the smart move. Taeyong listened. He kept his eyes on the signal. He noticed something else. a second embedded layer in the transmission. It wasn't audio. It was a low-grade psychic imprint, a bleed-over from the Harvester broadcast. He isolated it and ran it through the neurofilter. He put on a headset. A wave of crushing sadness hit him. It was a feeling of absolute futility. Told him to give up, to stop fighting. It was a soft, quiet voice in his mind suggesting that surrender was the only peace. He tore the headset off, his heart pounding. "They're not just killing them," Taeyong said, his voice loud in the quiet room. Everyone looked at him. "They are convincing them to accept it. They are making it seem like mercy. It's a trick." He played the filtered psychic layer. The officers listened, their faces turning pale. They felt the echo of the despair. "That," Captain Yuna said, her eyes sharp, "is not mercy. That is predation. That is a wolf telling the sheep that being eaten is a kindness." The decision solidified. The argument was over. You do not leave family to a monster, even if they ask you to. Especially if they ask you to. That is when they need you most. "Plot a course for Kala 3, Yuna ordered. "Mobilize the Dauntless Battle Group. Fast response protocol. We are not a full fleet. We are a scalpel. Our objective is not to fight a war. It is to perform an extraction. A rescue." Taeyong felt a chill that was not fear. It was purpose. The Calisans had sent their message into the dark, hoping it would find no one. They had hoped to be the last of humanity to suffer. Instead, their signal had found an ear. And that ear was attached to a heart that still remembered what it meant to be human. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Yuna looked at the star chart. Kala 3 was several jumps away. They would be too late to save everyone. They all knew that. The harvest was probably almost complete. "We are not going for the lucky," Yuna said to her crew. "We are going for the last. For the ones holding out. We are going to show them that their call was heard. And we are going to show these harvesters what happens when you ignore a human's plea. You force them to come in person." The battle group, 3 sleek ships built for speed and precise strikes, moved into formation. The jump space drives began to charge. The quiet listening post watched them go. Taeyong remained at his station. His job was done, but he kept the channel to Kala 3 open. He listened to the repeating message, the plea, the warning. He listened to the silence between the words. He imagined Min-Soo and June, people he would never meet, running for the hills. He hoped they were still running. He typed a short, powerful burst signal on the same ancient frequency. It was not a complex message. It was just a single phrase, compressed and sent with maximum power. He didn't know if their old equipment could receive it. He didn't know if anyone was left to hear it. But he sent it anyway. The phrase was simple, "Hold on." Then he waited. The Dauntless was on its way. The harvesters had ignored the call for mercy. Now they would meet the answer. The rocky hills of Kala 3 were not a safe place, but they were a hiding place. Min-Soo pulled June into a shallow cave. The psychic hum from the harvesters was weaker here, blocked by stone. The crushing weight of despair lifted just enough to let them think. June trembled. "They told everyone not to come," she whispered. "Why would anyone come?" Min-Soo looked out at the gray valley below. Their home was a dull, colorless patch. The harvester ships hung in the sky like silent black fruit. "Maybe no one will," he said. But he didn't believe it. The old stories, the ones about Earth, whispered in his mind. They were stories of a fierce and stubborn people. People who did not listen to warnings to stay away from trouble. They were stories he had always thought were myths. In the sky, the harvesters finished their work in the valley. The tendrils of gray light withdrew. The ships began to drift slowly toward the hills. The hum in their minds grew stronger again. The feeling of hopelessness returned, seeping through the rock. It was a gentle, insistent pressure. "There is no point. Just be still. It is peaceful." June's breathing slowed. Her eyes lost focus. "Min-Soo, it's easier if you don't fight it." He grabbed her shoulders. "Look at me. Look at the valley. Is that peace? That is nothing. That is empty. Fight it, June." He was fighting it himself. It felt like trying to swim up through thick mud. Every instinct for survival was being quieted, told to rest. It was the wrong kind of mercy. It was the mercy of the grave. Meanwhile, in the emptiness of space near Kala 3, the void rippled. With a flash of distorted light, 3 ships tore into reality. The TFV Dauntless and its 2 escort cutters arrived. They were sleek, angular, and silent. Their engines glowed a soft blue on the bridge of the Dauntless. Captain Yuna watched the main screen. The planet below was scarred with vast, gray circles of death. The harvester ships, organic and strange, moved with a slow, terrible purpose. Her crew was silent. The sight was worse than the intelligence reports. "Scan for life signs," Yuna ordered. Her voice was calm. The tactical officer, a man named Suk, worked his console. "Life signs are fragmented, isolated, fading, concentrated in the rocky highlands here." A map showed a few tiny clusters of green light against a spreading gray. "The alien vessels are converging on those locations. They're cleaning up the last survivors," Yuna said. "Open a channel to the lead alien vessel. All frequencies. Send the first contact package." The visual one. Lieutenant Juncio sent the signal. It was the packet of images. Help, compassion, intervention. A definition of mercy that required action. They waited. The harvester ships did not change course. They did not respond. They simply continued toward the hills. Then, the Dauntless was hit. But not by a weapon. It was a wave. Passed through the ship's hull like it wasn't there. It hit the cruise mines. On the bridge, Yuna gasped. A profound sadness washed over her. It was the sadness of a long-lost fight. Why bother? The people below were already gone. Their ships were so few. The enemy was so many. It would be easier, smarter to just turn around. To save themselves. A quiet voice in her head whispered it was the merciful thing to do. To not prolong the suffering. Around her, crew members slumped at their stations. A young pilot named Sumin let go of her controls and put her head in her hands. "We're too late," she murmured. "It's over." The feeling was everywhere. It was deep and convincing. This was the same signal that had broken the Calisans. It was the harvester's only weapon, and it was a powerful one. They sensed the new ships. They sent their pacification pulse. To them, it was an act of generosity. They were offering these new creatures a painless surrender. Captain Yuna's vision swam. She saw the gray fields below. She thought of the Calisans' plea to stay away. Maybe they were right. Maybe this was a mistake. Her hand hovered over the command to retreat. Then her eyes focused on a single image still on her screen. It was a thermal scan of the hills. One of the green dots of life was moving. It was running. Someone down there was still running. Someone was still fighting the despair. The sadness in her mind was a lie. It was a chemical, a psychic trick. Her real mercy, the human mercy, was a fire. It burned against the cold. She gripped the edge of her command chair. Her knuckles turned white. She forced air into her lungs and spoke. Her voice was a rough scrape against the quiet on the bridge. "Report," she barked. The crew jumped. Suk shook his head, blinking. "Captain, life signs, Mr. Suk. Are they still there?" Suk looked at his screen. "Yes, Captain. Faint, but there." Yuna stood up. The weight was still there, pushing her down, but she straightened her back. "They are hitting us with a weapon that attacks the will. They think making us give up is a mercy." She looked at each of her crew, making eye contact. They do not know what mercy means to a human who sees their kin in chains. Mercy is not surrender. Mercy is the bullet you fire to break the chains. Her words were simple. They cut through the psychic fog. They were a reminder. They were not here for an easy fight. They were here for a righteous one. Across the ship, crew members sat up. They remembered their training. They remembered why they had come. The shared purpose became a shield. The despair was still a pressure, a background noise, but it was no longer a command. "The alien vessels are entering attack range on the survivors," Suk said, his voice stronger now. Yuna sat back down. The human mercy was gone from her face. What remained was the resolve. Target the lead ship. Aim for its energy projections. The tendrils. We are not asking for their surrender. We are giving them our answer. The dauntless weapons powered up. They glowed with a sharp, clean light, so different from the sickly gray of the harvesters. The harvester ships, receiving no signal of surrender, finally changed their behavior. They slowed. They turned. For the first time, they perceived the new arrivals not as prey to be pacified, but as a threat to be removed. They had ignored the call for mercy. Now they faced the people who had answered it. The cave was cold. Min-Su and June could see the gray light of the harvesters painting the rocks outside. The humming was a physical thing now, vibrating in their teeth. The feeling of despair was a thick blanket, smothering their will. June's eyes were closed. She had stopped trembling. "Just sleep, Min-Su," she whispered. "It doesn't hurt." Min-Su fought to keep his own eyes open. He was so tired. The voice in his head was so reasonable. "Why struggle?" it asked. "The end is clean. Your sister is at peace. Join her. This is mercy." He was about to listen. He was about to let go. Then, the sky above the hills flashed. Not with the dull gray of the harvesters, but with a sharp white light. A sound followed, a deep thump that they felt in their chests through the rock. It was not a sound of harvesting. It was a sound of violence. Min-Su's eyes snapped open. He crawled to the mouth of the cave. June stirred behind him. In the sky, new shapes moved. They were angular and fast like knives. Light, blue and bright, shot from them, cutting through the dark. It struck one of the drifting harvester ships. Where the light hit, the organic hull of the alien ship cracked and blackened. A piece of it broke off and tumbled, burning, into the valley below. Something changed in the air. The humming stuttered. The psychic blanket of despair flickered. "What is that?" June asked, her voice weak but curious. Min-Su didn't know, but the sight of the dark ship being hurt, being challenged, sent a jolt through his body. The false feeling of merciful surrender cracked like ice. A raw, older feeling surged up from beneath it. Hope. It was painful and fierce. On the bridge of the Dauntless, the psychic pressure was still there. It was like a headache behind everyone's eyes. But they had a job to do. "Direct hit on their emitter array," Suk reported. "Their pacification field just dropped by 20% in this sector." Captain Yuna nodded. "Good. Keep them busy. Where are our drop troops?" Sergeant Chul's voice came over the comm. It was calm and clear. "Drop pod Alpha is loaded and ready, Captain. We see the survivor clusters. We are going to the largest one in the eastern hills." "Your priority is the survivors, Sergeant," Yuna said. "Get them, shield them, and get them out. You are not there to start a ground war. You are a lifeline." "Understood," Chul said. "A lifeline. Firing now." From the belly of one of the escort cutters, a pod shot toward the planet. It burned through the atmosphere like a meteor. Harvester tendrils of gray light reached for it, but the pod was too fast, too small. It slammed into the rocky ground a kilometer from Min-Su's cave. The pod doors blew off. 6 figures in heavy, powered armor stepped out. Their armor was not sleek. It was blocky and strong, painted a dull gray-green. They moved with a speed that didn't match their size. Sergeant Chul took point, his helmet scanning the area. "Life signs are close. This way," he said. His squad moved as one, their heavy boots crushing stone. Min-Su saw them coming. For a second, fear gripped him. They looked like machines, like soldiers from the darkest old stories. They were nothing like the peaceful Calisans. Then he saw where they were going. They were moving between the harvester ground drones, small, skittering things that spread the gray light, and the caves where people hid. The soldiers didn't stop to fight the drones. They shot them with precise bursts of fire, clearing a path, but they never stopped moving forward. They were coming toward him. A harvester drone, like a spider made of shadow, scuttled over a rock toward their cave opening. Its front glowed, ready to emit the silencing light. Before Min-Su could react, a single blue bolt of energy struck the drone. It exploded into pieces of dark, brittle material. The soldier who fired did not break stride. The squad reached the cave. The lead soldier's helmet folded back with a hiss. Inside was the face of a man about Minsu's age. He had a sharp, kind face. He looked at Minsu, then at Jun behind him. "Are you hurt?" Sergeant Chul asked. His voice was human. Tired, but human. Minsu could only stare. You came. We heard your call," Chul said simply. He turned to his squad. "Kim, Lee, set up the portable shield generator here. This is our first collection point. We need to cover their retreat." Two soldiers planted a device on the ground. A dome of shimmering blue energy, faint but visible, spread over the cave mouth. Outside the dome, a harvester tendril of gray light washed over it. The blue shield held. The despair did not reach them. The effect was immediate. The crushing weight in Minsu's mind vanished. He could think. He could feel. June took a deep, gasping breath, like she was breaking the surface of a deep lake. Color returned to her face. Chul offered a massive, armored hand to Minsu. It was not a weapon in that moment. It was a tool for lifting. "We need to move," Chul said. "The shield won't hold forever. We have a path. Can you walk?" Minsu took the hand. The armor was cold, but the grip was firm. He pulled June up. She clung to him, looking at the soldiers with wide, awestruck eyes. "You told us not to come," Chul said as they started moving, his soldiers forming a protective circle around them. "We have a different understanding. On Earth, mercy is not leaving people alone in the dark. Mercy is walking into the dark to bring them out." He pointed. Through the rocky pass, Minsu could see the landing zone. More drop pods had come down. More blue shields were popping up, creating a safe corridor through the gray death. Other figures in rags, other Callison survivors, were being gathered, shielded, and led along the path. Above them, the sky was a battle. The bright, precise lights of the human ships cut through the gloom. They were not destroying the harvester ships completely. They were wounding them, disabling them, making them fall back. It was a violent, dangerous ballet. Every shot fired by the humans was an act of protection for the people on the ground. Minsu understood then. The harvester's mercy was a quiet end. This was different. This mercy was loud. It was bright. It was filled with the terrible noise of weapons and the shouts of soldiers. It was terrifying. And it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. They had pleaded that no one would come. Their calls had been ignored. And now, finally, someone had answered. The path through the rocks was a narrow line of life in a dead world. Sergeant Chul and his squad moved with a purpose that was both fierce and gentle. They did not stop to fight unless they had to. Their goal was clear: get the survivors to the landing zone. Minsu helped June over a rough patch of stone. Behind them, the blue energy shield over their old cave flickered and died. The gray light washed over the spot, leaving only cold rock. They had left just in time. Other survivors joined them. An old man named Byung-ho, carrying a little girl named Suni who had lost her family. A young woman named Yoonji, her face stained with dust and tears. They were all silent, stunned, moving in a daze. The absence of the psychic pressure was a shock. They could feel their own fear again, their own grief. It was raw and painful, but it was theirs. Chul spoke to them as they walked, his voice steady through his helmet speaker. "Keep moving. Stay inside the corridor. Look forward, not back." Above, the battle painted the sky. The human ships, the Dauntless and its escorts, were like angry wasps. They did not stand and fight the larger harvester vessels head-on. They were too smart for that. They flew in fast, hard patterns. They shot at the parts of the harvester ships that glowed with the gray energy. When they hit them, the light would sputter and die. A piece of the ship would go dark and drift. It was a strategy of precise, violent medicine. They were cutting the sickness away. One of the big harvester ships, wounded and angry, turned its full attention to the ground. It began to pulse, a deep, throbbing light. Dozens of the skittering drone spiders dropped from its belly like rotten seeds. They hit the ground and swarmed, not toward the soldiers, but toward the survivors. The harvesters understood now. The new creatures were protecting the prey. To break the new creatures, they would take the prey. Contact! Swarm on the left flank! One of Chul's soldiers shouted. Chul didn't hesitate. Chong Park! Hold the line! Keep the corridor closed. The rest of you with me. He turned and planted his feet. His heavy rifle came up. Minsu watched, pulling June and little Suni close. The soldier named Chong stepped in front of them, his armored body a wall. The drones came in a wave of clicking legs and gathering gray light. Chul and his 3 soldiers opened fire. Blue bolts tore into the swarm. Drones exploded. Others were knocked sideways, their legs shattered. But there were so many. A few got through, scurrying toward the survivors. Minsu saw one leap toward Yunji. She froze, her eyes wide with the old, familiar despair. Before the drone could touch her, Sergeant Chul was there. He didn't shoot. He swung the butt of his rifle like a club. The solid impact shattered the drone into pieces. He then turned and fired 3 shots at once, taking out 3 more drones that were climbing the rocks above Byung-Ho.it was not graceful. It was brutal and efficient. It was protection in its most direct form. Every movement was an act of defense. Chul's armor was scratched and scored by near misses from the drone's cutting beams. He didn't seem to notice. Keep moving, he yelled again, his voice sharp. Don't stop to watch. They ran. The soldiers created a moving pocket of safety, a bubble of violence that kept the gray death at bay. Minsu realized this was the true face of the mercy they had been sent. It was not soft words. It was the deafening roar of guns. It was the smell of burnt metal and ozone. It was the sight of a giant armored man standing between a child and the void. They reached the landing zone. It was a flatter area where 3 more drop pods had landed. Larger portable shield generators created a wide, safe dome. More armored soldiers were there, setting up a triage station. Medics in lighter armor were already treating wounded Kalisanists as they passed through the shield. The last of the humming vanished. The air felt clean. Minsu saw a medic gently wrapping a blanket around an old woman. He saw a soldier giving a canteen to a crying boy. Chul's helmet folded back again. His face was sweaty, and he had a cut on his cheek. He looked at his small group of survivors. Medic! Over here for the girl, he said, pointing to Suni. He then turned to Minsu. You made it. You're safe here. For now. Minsu found his voice. Your ship? Your people in the sky? They are fighting for us. Chul nodded, looking up at the flashes of light. That's the job. But we told you not to come, June said softly, her eyes filled with a new kind of tears, not of despair, but of a confused, overwhelming gratitude. Sergeant Chul looked at her. For the first time, he seemed less like a soldier and more like a tired man. I know, he said, but you were asking for the wrong kind of mercy. You were asking to be left alone to die. We don't give that kind. He gestured around the shielded camp, at the medics, at his own scarred armor. We give this kind, the messy kind, the kind that fights. In orbit, Captain Yuna watched the ground feed. She saw the survivors reaching the landing zone. She saw the shields holding. Good work, Sergeant, she said quietly. Prepare the evac shuttles. We'll get them out on the next low pass. The harvester ships were regrouping. They were not used to this. Their prey never fought back. Their mercy was never refused. They were slow, but they were not stupid. They began to gather, to focus their power. The Dauntless had drawn their full attention. The real fight was about to begin. The ground operation was an act of mercy. What came next would be an act of terrible, clarifying violence. The harvesters had ignored the calls for mercy. Now they would drown in the answer. The landing zone was a fragile bubble of blue light and noise in the gray silence of the world. Evac shuttles, shaped like sharp-winged birds, screamed down from the sky. They landed just long enough for Sergeant Chul and the other soldiers to hurry the Callison survivors inside. Minsu helped June up the ramp. He took one last look back at the soldier, Chul, who gave him a short nod before the shuttle door sealed. The shuttle lifted off, shaking violently as it pushed through the atmosphere. Through a small window, Minsu saw the battle below growing smaller. The human ships were so few against the dark shapes of the harvesters. On the bridge of the Dauntless, the situation was becoming clear. The harvesters were learning. Their ships stopped chasing the fast human cutters. Instead, they began to move together, forming a tight cluster around their largest vessel. A deep, rhythmic pulse began to emanate from the group. "Energy spike," Suk called out. "Massive. They're concentrating their psychic emitter. They're gonna try to overwhelm us all at once." Captain Yuna watched the tactical display. The harvester cluster was like a brain, and it was preparing to send a single crushing thought. A thought of such profound despair that it would smother the will of every human in the system. It was their final solution, a blanket of silent mercy to cover the entire battle. "We cannot let that pulse fire," Yuna said. Her voice was calm. "If it does, our crews will be incapacitated. The evac shuttles will fall from the sky. Sergeant Chul's team on the ground will lay down their weapons. It will all be over." Her first officer, a man named Day, looked grim. "Our weapons can't penetrate that formation in time. They've armored themselves with their own ships." Yuna was silent for a moment. The pulsing glow on the screen grew brighter. "Then we don't shoot our way in," she said. "We deliver a message. A boarding action. Target the lead ship's central nexus. That's the source." "It's a suicide run, Captain," Day said softly. "Their point defenses will tear a boarding pod apart." "Not if we are the distraction," Yuna replied. She turned to face her crew. "The Dauntless will make a frontal assault. We will draw their fire, their attention. Sergeant Chul's squad is the best we have. They will take a fast cutter, the Arrow, and fly in our shadow. When the harvesters focus on us, the Arrow will break away and pierce the hull of the lead ship. They will go inside." The orders were given. On the ground, Chul received the new mission. His squad had just returned from the landing zone. They were tired, their armor battered. They refueled and rearmed without a word. Minutes later, the Dauntless turned and flew straight toward the harvester cluster. It fired every weapon it had. Lights and noise filled the space around it. The harvesters reacted as predicted. They turned their weapons on the big, angry ship coming at them. Tendrils of gray energy and bolts of dark matter lashed out at the Dauntless. Its shields flared bright white, straining under the assault and the chaotic light show. A smaller, sleeker ship, the Arrow, dove like a needle through the storm. It was barely a speck. It avoided the main weapons, riding the blind spots created by the Dauntless' attack. It shot toward the largest harvester ship and fired a single specialized torpedo. The torpedo did not explode. It melted a small, hot hole through the organic hull and then sealed the edges behind it. The Arrow flew straight into the hole. Inside, it was not like a human ship. The walls were warm and fleshy, pulsing with a slow, sick rhythm. The air was thick and smelled of damp soil and metal. Chul and his 5 soldiers moved quickly, their boots sticking slightly to the soft floor. They followed their scanners toward the source of the powerful energy signal. They met no living crew. The ship seemed to be one single, connected organism. But it defended itself. Walls would convulse to block their path. Tendrils would whip from ceilings. Strange, half-formed mouths would open and scream a psychic shriek directly into their minds. The soldiers fought through it all. They cut through barriers with focused plasma torches. They blasted the shrieking mouths into silence. The psychic screams were bad, but they were not the focused blanket of despair from outside. They were sharp, painful headaches. The soldiers' training and their shared purpose were a shield. They reached the heart of the ship. It was a vast chamber. In the center was a massive, pulsating node of dark light. It looked like a cancerous heart. The rhythmic pulse they had seen on their scanners came from here. It was building to its final, system-wide burst of pacification. Chul's squad took cover behind strange, bony growths. They aimed their rifles at the node. "Wait," Chul ordered. He opened a channel. "Captain, we are at the source. Ready to engage." On the Dauntless, Yuna's voice came back, strained. "Do not destroy it yet, Sergeant. Open a two-way comm channel. Full bandwidth. Feed it the data. Chul understood. He nodded to his communications specialist, Private Kim. Kim set a device on the floor. It projected a small, hard light screen. On it, the same packet of images from human history began to play. The liberation of camps, the sharing of food, the healing of the wounded. But this time it was followed by more. It showed the Terran Coalition's laws, the rules of war, articles stating the rights of prisoners, the protocols for aiding civilians. It was a flood of data, a galaxy's worth of concepts foreign to a creature whose only idea of mercy was quiet death. The pulsing node seemed to shudder. The rhythm of the build-up faltered. The data was not a physical attack. It was a cognitive virus. It was showing the Harvester Gestalt mind a universe of contradictions. Strength used for protection, violence governed by law, victory measured in lives saved rather than biomass collected. Chul stepped out from cover, his helmet retracted. He spoke, not to a captain, but to the heart of the enemy. "You received their call for mercy," he said, his voice echoing in the wet chamber. "You ignored it. You then received ours. You misinterpreted it." He pointed at the screen, at the images of humans lifting each other up. "Your definition is a lie. Ours is a promise. And we keep our promises." The node pulsed wildly, erratically. It was trying to process. It was trying to compute a reality where the prey not only fought back but fought back for reasons that made no logical sense. Where mercy was an active, costly, sometimes violent verb. The data stream was a poison to its simple, cruel logic. The building wave of psychic energy didn't explode outward, collapsed inward. The node began to crack, dark light leaking from fissures. The harmony of the harvester cluster was broken. The song of despair ended in a silent, confused scream. On the bridge of the Dauntless, the intense pressure vanished. The weapons fire from the other harvester ships became uncoordinated, wild. "Sergeant," Eunice said over the comm, her voice full of a deep exhaustion. "Your job is done. Get out of there." The chamber around Chul was starting to break apart. The soldiers turned and ran back the way they came, toward their waiting ship, leaving the broken heart of the harvester to beat its last, confused beats alone. The medical bay of the TFV Dauntless was quiet. The only sounds were the soft hum of machines and the low murmur of voices. Clean, white light shone down on rows of beds. Minsu sat on the edge of one bed, a warm blanket around his shoulders. June slept in the bed next to him, her breathing deep and even for the first time in days. Around them were other Calisans, Byung-ho, Little Suni, Yoonji. They were safe. They were warm. They were alive. The door slid open and Sergeant Chul walked in. He was out of his heavy armor, wearing a simple gray shipsuit. A bandage was on his cheek. He looked tired, but he walked over and stood near Minsu. "How is she?" Chul asked, nodding at Jun. "Sleeping," Minsu said. "Really sleeping." Chul gave a small, tired smile. "Good." Minsu looked at the soldier. This man had fought through monsters to pull them from a cave. He had stood between them and the end of everything. Now he just looked like a man who needed a long rest. "The other ships?" Minsu asked quietly. "Gone," Chul said. "The ones that weren't broken just drifted away, like they forgot what they were doing. They're leaving the system." On the bridge, Captain Yuna watched the sensors. The remaining harvester vessels were moving slowly, aimlessly, toward the edge of the system. The coherent, cruel intelligence that had guided them was shattered. The data poison had done its work. They were no longer a threat. They were just broken things, returning to the dark. The battle was over. Kala 3 was scarred with great gray wounds, but the bleeding had stopped. Later, Minsu was allowed to walk through one of the ship's observation decks. He looked out at the stars. He saw the planet below, a mix of familiar blue and the horrible new gray. He felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Taeyong, the listening post operator who had first heard their call. He had been brought to the Dauntless after the battle. "You heard us," Minsu said. It wasn't a question. "I heard you," Taeyong confirmed. "Every word." Minsu turned to face him. The confusion and guilt he had been feeling finally spilled out. You heard us ask you not to come. Why did you? Why did you not listen? Taeyong was silent for a moment, looking at the planet. He thought of the heavy psychic despair he had felt through his headphones. He thought of the images of the gray fields. Because a call for mercy, he said slowly, carefully, is not a request for solitude. It is a request for aid. You asked us not to come for your sake. He met Minsu's eyes. We came for ours. Minsu frowned, not understanding. To be human, Taeyong explained, his voice soft but firm, is to answer. When we see our people in the dark, we turn on a light. Even if they tell us not to, even if it is dangerous. We do not do it because it is easy. We do it because it is what makes us us. You were asking us to be something else. We could not do that. The truth settled over Minsu. They had pleaded that humans wouldn't come. They had believed that was the ultimate kindness. But the humans who heard them had a different kindness. A harder one. A louder one. Their calls for mercy had been ignored by the harvesters, who saw it as weakness. And their plea to be left alone had been ignored by their own kin, who saw it as a cry for help. Back in the medical bay, June was awake. Captain Yuna stood by her bed. June looked up at the captain's stern, kind face. What happens to us now? June asked. That is up to you, Yuna said. You can come with us. Find a new world. Or, when it is safe, we can help you return to Kala 3 to rebuild. It is your home. We do not take that from you. And the harvesters? Will they come back? Yuna's expression grew harder. We have sent their own failure back to them. We have shown them that their mercy is a crime. And we have shown them that our mercy has teeth. If they are smart, they will fear it. They will fear the sound of our answer. The message was clear. The galaxy had seen a new thing, a species that defined mercy not as surrender, but as righteous intervention. A species that would cross the stars, not for conquest, but to lift someone up. A species whose answer to despair was not quiet acceptance, but a roaring, defiant noise. On the observation deck, Minsu finally understood. The harvester's silence was a lie. The true mercy was here on this ship. It was in the hum of the engines taking them to safety. It was in the bandage on Sergeant Chul's cheek. It was in the quiet sobs of relief in the medical bay. It was a promise, written in fire and fulfilled in silence. He looked at the stars, no longer feeling small. He was part of something bigger now, something that did not hide from the dark, something that answered. Below, the gray scars on Kala 3 would take a long time to heal. But for the first time, the silence on the planet was not the silence of death. It was the quiet of a terrible storm having passed. It was the sound of a promise kept.